This is a follow-up video to the last one I did for this 97 Mustang SVT Cobra odometer issue. I replaced the gears in there, the worm gear and the driven gear, and had to redo them because I had them in backwards. But the odometer worked. Now I've got this back out because I had left this little drive gear out that drives the Tripmeter. So what I'm going to try to do, since the odometer definitely is working, is put this back in and see if it'll turn that Tripmeter and work like it should. So we're going to go ahead and get this apart. Got to take out all these screws around here, and we'll get started on that. Now this video, what I'm really trying to do is point out the mistakes I made, because I went to a lot of trouble to get all this out and put it back together, and it didn't work. Not only that, but the tachometer didn't work, caused some errors. So I point those out in this video, and the first part of this series, if you will, I'll put a link at the end, and it shows you what I did originally with it. So there's two parts to this. Where I put in the plastic CJ Pony Parts gears, and this part where I had to mess around with the mechanical odometer itself and the trip meter. And I'm pointing out the mistakes that I made, so you won't make them if you try this yourself. Now I've got to pry this up and pry that up and then pull that up. This gear and the little worm gear you can't see there is connected to that motor. That's what I replaced in the last video from CJ Pony Parts. They work good once I got them in correctly. You need to watch that video to see how to do that. But what I need to do now is take this motor. Well, let's see. I'm not sure I need to take the motor out and that out or not, but I need to take this loose, that screw loose over here, and that loose, because I need to get this whole mechanical odometer assembly up and out of there. This is the trip meter push button control. That's the little push button right there. Okay. Get a closer look here. So definitely hard to focus on. There is a little black gear right down there that this tooth gear has to engage with to turn the trip meter. And this little goes on this odometer axle shaft here. It's a square and it fits over that, so we'll have to take a look at how to do that. Seems to be turning okay. So what I had to do last time was get this odometer out of there. I should be able to do that just by prying it up. And probably on this end. Need something better than that. You'll notice earlier I had flipped the this around, so that's the odometer is what you're seeing there. This one end of it, you have to get a little small screwdriver and pry up that little axle shaft out of a little little slot. On the other side, it's a clip that kind of holds over the axle shaft. That's a little trickier, but you can get them out if you're careful. Screwdriver alone didn't work too well on the clip side. That's the side towards the trip meter. So I had to use these needle nose pliers and be a little careful so I didn't break anything to get that little, it's like a hook of plastic over the axle shaft there. And I said earlier the axle shaft was square. It's not really, it's just flat on one side. That helps drive that axle shaft with the gear on it, which turns the trip meter. There we go. There's a little snap hook there you have to get out. Now I got to put this on here. Without breaking anything. Now what I'm not showing here is the fact that when I got this all back in together, I had it upside down. I'll point that out later. But after I got it all together and tried it out, everything was locked up and the tachometer didn't work. So I had to pull it all back out and turn the odometer upside down to get it correct. It only goes one way. Like that. Didn't fit real tight in there. Unfortunately, my hand's in the way, but what I'm trying to do is get both ends of that odometer snapped back down into those little slots where it's supposed to be. It's a little tricky. Unfortunately, my hand's covering what I was doing. Okay, I slipped that axle shaft back on that odometer shaft. It's like a half round type thing, so it can't spin around. This has got to slip over this and engage that little black gear down there. I can't hold the camera and do this. Okay, something I need to point out here. I made a big mistake when I put this thing back together with the axle shaft back in it, because nothing worked. This whole odometer assembly here was upside down. See these little prongs here? And those little lever-like things? They're supposed to be flipped around. That's upside down. Because this whole assembly here is upside down. So when I bolt it in, this is obviously not going to give me the right mileage, and those are going to be jammed and it won't work. Also, the tachometer didn't work. So I thought I've got a bad electrical connection. So when I took it apart again, I sanded all these little prongs down and all these and little receptacles go in and made sure that they were tight fitting before I put it back together. And I think you really need to do that. So that's very important. Okay, this is important. Remember I talked about sanding the little prongs on this side of the circuit board? These little receptacles here, they can get bent and out of whack. And if they don't make good contact, some of your gauges aren't going to work. And that's why the tachometer wasn't working. I had to go in there with a small screwdriver and needle nose, get all these things straightened up, tightened up, so they were a nice snug fit with those prongs when I inserted in there. The other thing is to make sure that odometer and tachometer cluster there is pressed snugly down in there and fits snugly. You got to make sure it's not only partially in, like I'm showing you here, to push it in tightly. Make sure it's in good and snug, or you'll have a problem. Okay, I didn't get a new video clip after I found out how I put the odometer upside down. So what I'm going to do is end this here, and I wanted to point out where I went wrong, so that if you're working on yours, you'll know what to look for. So, just wanted to point these things out, and I did get it back together, and it worked. The tachometer worked after getting those connections tight and sanding those little prongs, and all that worked. So. That was an interesting challenge. pulled this odometer assembly out and put it back in probably half a dozen times. Finally got it done. It's very frustrating, but you just have to be patient. Hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please like the video and subscribe. Check the like button. We'd really appreciate it. Thanks for watching.